Hello and welcome back, and here we are at the QNAP stand here at Computex 2024 in Taipei. I've already gone through some of the hardware solutions that we've talked about throughout the course of the week that QNAP have got on their roadmap for 2024 and 2025. But in this video, we're going to cover a lot. So straight away, I'm going to go with some of the more niche items first. These are the ones that aren't going to be for everyone, but I would argue are still very, very interesting solutions there. So number one, I want to talk about this. This is the new USB 4, so that's USB Type-C connection, into a 10 GBE adapter there. This is allowing you to add 10 gigabit Ethernet without a Thunderbolt port, without a PCIe slot. This is USB 4 connection there. Doesn't require additional power, is fanless, and ultimately means that you can add 10 GBE to your QNAP, to your PC, to supported servers, and even down the road Mac very, very easily there. Arriving in an SFP format there, you can also utilize a copper-based version too. The copper-based version there, no need for transceivers, no need for fiber cabling and adapters. You can go straight in with copper and straight out in USB Type 4 connectivity there. Do bear in mind that right now, as mentioned, that Mac support there seems like it weighs into the future, and I would argue this is probably looking like a Q3 or Q4 release. But QNAP do state that they are working on a 25 gigabit Ethernet version as well, and that's a 2-port one. And given that USB Type 4 can achieve 40 gigabits per second, that is a huge amount of performance at your fingertips there. Now, while we're continuing with the subject of USB Type 4, let's a USB 4 Type-C, I should say. This is their new 8-bay USB 4 JBOD expansion device. Arriving with that USB Type-C, USB 4 connection on the rear, this will allow you to expand storage significantly and harness that 40 gigabits per second bandwidth at your fingertips. Now, of course, you're going to be able to utilize this with Mac systems, and of course, you are going to have to utilize your connected system to manage the RAID there. But luckily, on QNAP QUTS and QNAP QTS, you can manage multiple RAID configurations as well as ZFS. So you're going to be able to really eke the most out of this. Now, there is a 12-bay rack mount version as well, so the rack mount users aren't being left out. And also that means that although you may want to go for traditional hard drives for capacity, it does still also open the door to utilizing SATA SSDs. Now, they will almost certainly expand this logic into smaller and bigger expansions down the road. So do keep that in mind. But let's move on to something else. With USB Type-C a wee bit longer, how about Thunderbolt 4 connectivity there? Well, Thunderbolt connectivity on QNAP NAS is not new, is it? Let's be honest, I've known about it for years, but because of the way they utilize Thunderbolt while taking advantage of Thunderbolt over Ethernet or Ethernet over Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt over IP, whatever you want to call it, they're also integrating now SMB multi-channel. That means that although up until now, if you're using a Thunderbolt NAS, you're only getting approximately around 1200 to 1500 megabytes per second cap, because of SMB multi-channel pooling those two connections into a single pathway, you're now able to achieve much, much higher numbers there. And those much, much higher numbers mean that if you are going to leverage an NVMe system like this one, you're going to be able to really harness the performance of that storage media successfully. Now, talking about harnessing storage media's performance, we've got this one, another 12-bay desktop flash solution. Now, a lot of you in the editing sector, post-production and more, will be well aware of a similar system to this that took advantage of PCIe Gen 4 NVMe U2 style storage. Now this utilizes SATA. It makes it more affordable, don't get me wrong, you're not going to get the performance of Gen 4 NVMe, but once you RAID up across the 12 bays and taking advantage of ZFS pools there, you're going to get some serious storage. It's going to make it more affordable, price per terabyte wise. The AMD Ryzen processor inside, although not as enterprisey as the one we saw in the other flash system, is still Gen 4. It supports up to an incredible 192 gigabytes of memory, and it supports 10 GBE, 25 GBE, and even some of those 100 gigabit Ethernet cards. It arrives with a fairly modest 10 GBE connection by comparison, but long time down the line, you're going to be able to add significant external performance to harness the performance of those, making it a lot more affordable to achieve those greater speeds along the way down the road. Be honest, it's been a wee bit enterprisey up to this point, and there's a lot of you there going, well, that all sounds good, Robbie, but it sounds mighty expensive, and I get what you're saying there. But then we have this, the 32X series, arriving in both a 4-bay and a 6-bay configuration. Now, these are ARM-based NASes. I can actually hear you guys yawning there in the background while I talk about this, but these are ARM-based NASes, quad-core Annapurna CPUs, but they arrive with ECC memory support, something you don't really hear about with an ARM-based processor. But it doesn't end there. On the rear of the system, they also arrive with 10 GBE and 2.5 GBE connections. Now, the 6-bay has got 2 SFP connections, and the 4-bay has got 1 SFP 10G connection. They both arrive with 2 ports there of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. That is a huge amount of external performance to play with at such an affordable price point, and you've got that ECC memory checksumming the living hell out of the data passing through it. Now, if that's not enough and you need some scalability, I'm pleased to say that these systems have also got a PCIe upgrade slot, Gen 3 x 4, so not a huge amount of bandwidth to play with, but that's more than enough to add further M.2 NVMe slots or add further network slots there. But of course, at this point, on a 4 and a 6-bay, there's only a finite amount of bandwidth there to play with. Carrying on the subject of bandwidth, look at this lovely little layer 2 switch we're playing with here. Now, it looks fairly innocuous, doesn't it? It's a layer 2 managed switch from QNAP. So what's exciting? Well, how about the 4 100 gigabit Ethernet connections there on the base of the system? That not enough? What about the 8 25 gigabit Ethernet connections as well, with a 1200 gigabit switching capacity there on the rear? And its scale being so modest indeed, that is a huge amount of network management for a larger scale QU-WAN or just SD-WAN operation over a large scope. So whether it's in-house or a centralized data management area for your multiple locations dotted around the country or even the world, that's a lot of pass-through to play with there. Now, this isn't the only switch we're going to talk about today, but I really thought it worth touching on just the sheer scope of where they are aiming long-term. And talking about network connections, failover, bandwidth and more, off the back of that 100 gig switch we just talked about, let's talk about this. This is some serious high availability situation here. So what we've got here at the stand, we've got a couple of QNAP NASes here, the 855X, 2 of those, and these are wired into 2 of the new QNAP high availability switches here. Now, they're both running in an active setup here. As you can see from the diagram here at the back, we have a heartbeat connection taking place right now between both of these QNAP NAS systems. So obviously, if one of those NASes goes down, you got yourself your high availability anyway. But on top of that, you've also got the option there in the active switch. Now, these switches are plugged into one another. The switches are also plugged into both NASes in that crisscross pattern there. That allows for a multi-layered failover there at all times. The switch manages it. And here you can see here at the back, all of the packets being exchanged, and apparently it is incredibly minimal losses down to the seconds if one of those switches or NASes goes down. So again, it's nice to see them tackling that high availability at the enterprise level with these switches, and also when you bear in mind the sheer scope of bandwidth on this switch, which is a full, all of these ports here are 10 gigabit Ethernet across, and this is a layer 3 light switch as well, so you can expand into lots of those actual physical networks all being banded together, not like that layer 2 switch we just looked at, which then leveraged against that higher performance there. But I think we should end things today talking about arguably one of the most interesting 1U rack mounts I've ever seen, and I am well aware what an oxymoron that last sentence was. I know what you're thinking, right? Looks fairly innocuous. We've all seen a 1U rack mount before, but this is ever so slightly different. Now, this is running on an Intel Atom processor here. It's a 4-bay 1U rack mount. So again, nothing that much special to write home about. It's got the 4 SATA bays there, lovely stuff. But what's really interesting is when you turn this bad boy around. Now, if you turn around on the rear, as you can make out there, you've got 3 small adapter slots there. These are E1S adapter slots there. These allow you to add, if you wish, further M.2 NVMe adapter. So you can add, if you choose, up to 3 2280 M2 NVMe's using this hot swap interface. But it doesn't stop there. You can also, if you wish, install 10 GBE connections via those same little adapters there on the rear. Now, why is that interesting? That means that you're leveraging a huge amount of performance internally or externally, but crucially both, and all of that in a 1U half-depth rack mount there. That is a very, very scalable solution that is insanely compact to boot. Also arrives inside with a couple of M.2 slots already to begin with. It's got a single SODIMM slot there that can be scaled up to 16 gigabytes, and ultimately, as far as this system goes, it's one of the best 1U rack mounts I've ever seen. Now, QNAP are telling me that they've got more stuff going on with their cloud service, but we'll be following that up in another video that's far more dedicated soon. Overall, I'm not going to say there's a lot here at the QNAP stand for the home user, apart from the rather affordable 10G solution with ECC memory we talked about, but from what I have seen, we're seeing some very exciting hardware solutions from them, and certainly pushing, during times when money is a little bit hard, arguably some very affordable solutions. And for those of you looking at expanding your NAS, and certainly if you've purchased the QNAP NAS in the last, say, 8 to 12 months, those ones that have got USB Type 4 or Thunderbolt 4, the idea that you can add further 10G to those connections, or that USB 4 connected NAS box, is going to be interesting. But that's enough for this stand here, the QNAP stand here at Computex. We've still got more to cover very, very soon. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There's a link in the description to everything we've discussed with all of their detailed specifications and more. And I will see you on the next video.